Howdy folks, welcome back to JJ's Library and Readings. Now I know where you're asking. Where you been at? For those who don't want to hear me yap, I'll put a timestamp in the description, but for ones who want some commentary, I'll give some for a little bit. So, where have I been at? The truth is that doesn't matter. What matters is I didn't post videos. And I'm very sorry about that. I want to be good at this YouTube thing. I want y'all to be able to rely on me to give you good content. And that's what I'm going to keep trying to do. So on Friday, I wasn't able to post a video game, which I feel like some of y'all were disappointed about. And I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry. I'll try to do better. I need to do good because y'all are deserving of good. But for now, I'd say let's get into this reading. And thank you all for watching this video. It means a lot to me. So, we're back with Between Two Fires, Chapter 23, of the Cottage and of the Song. Thomas took the girl from Pere Matthew, hoisting her over his shoulder, in the same way that Jacob had so long ago on the rainy afternoon in Normandy. The knight pulled the priest along by the arm for as far as the cleric would walk, which was not far. He was struggling to breathe, and his face had swollen so badly his eyes had shut. He looked dead already. He collapsed in a field not far from a house, where the light of a hearth fire danced behind closed shutters. Thomas, dripping the cold in his armor, laid the girl down next to the priest. He knew they both would need warmth. He must go to the house, and he must hurry. But the priest sounded as if he were choking even now. Thomas stripped down to his shirt and breeches and propped Pere Matthew's head up as best as he could with the soaked gamson he wore beneath his chain mail, and that seemed to help. The priest pawed the air blindly with one shaking hand, and Thomas squeezed it. "Don't die, bugger," he said, now picking up the girl and sloshing through the high grass and wild flowers towards the cottage. Dogs barked at him from inside, and he heard a goat bleat as well. A shadow blocked the fire-lit gaps in the shutters as someone inside peeked at him. He held the girl out as if she were his bond of peace. "I am unarmed. I need help." "Are you sick?" an old man said. "No." "Well, I am. I buried my last son yesterday, and today I can't stop sneezing. I know what that means. I'm not afraid." "Neither am I. Our ship sank in the river. My daughter will die without warmth. She'll die if she comes in here, like as not. There's a horse blanket in the stable, if nobody's taken it. I want to bring her near the fire, please." "Your choice," he said, and drew the bolt, letting the door swing wide open. The goat ran out, but stayed near the house. The dogs whimpered and barked uncertainly until their master shoved them back with his foot, and they stopped their complaints and settled near the hearth, one of them half-heartedly wagging her tail. Once the strangers were in, the dogs were moved off again to clear a spot near the fire of the girl, who was waking up now. She groaned. "What happened to your faces?" the old man said. "River. Something in it stung us." He looked at the old man now, with his fine white hair plastering to his head, and saw the sorrow in his eyes, and the sag of the skin around him. The man looked gray. The man looked sick. "Stung you? I fished that river for 50 years and nothing ever stung me. I'll talk later. Our priest dies tonight, but not in a field." The old man looked Thomas over and then sighed, concluding that he had nothing to lose but trusting him. Death at this giant's hands would be kinder than what would come in a day or two, and it would be nice to see a priest. "Bring him, then." The old man sneezed 3 times in a row and crossed himself as Thomas slimmed over in the darkness beyond the door. The female dog licked the priest's face. Thomas went to push it away, but Delphine pointed at the priest's mouth, which bore a hint of a smile. So Thomas acceded and let the beast keep at it. He wondered how long Pere Matthew had left. He had thrown up violently, and now he couldn't stop shaking. Worse, he fought for every breath. but he did not cry out. "You might not have been a soldier, Bugger, but you're tough. Stop calling him that," said the girl. Thomas turned an angry glance at her, but softened it immediately. "Yes." He put his hand on the priest's chest. The priest fought one of his slitted eyes open and looked at the knight. And then he looked up past him, pointing at something on the wall. A lute hung diagonally, covered in dust, near several upside-down bouquets of dried flowers. Thomas turned now to the old man and said, "Do you play?" "I did," he said, holding up two hands with gnarled fingers. "I thought that I wanted to be a troubadour, but then I married. Can you play a little?" "Maybe a little." The old man clambered into a stump and pulled the instrument down from its pegs, blowing a plume of dust off it. He tried to tune it, but it couldn't manage with his wretched fingers. He plucked a few sour strings and limped through half of the Provincial love song, singing in his croaking voice. Then he couldn't stand the sound of himself anymore, and he stopped. He sneezed, wincing, putting his finger to his neck, and feeling for the first time the exquisitely painful acorn-sized lump there. "And so," he said, letting the lute dangle from his hand. He looked at the man dying by the fire, and at the sadness in the knight's face, and he thought about the shallow graves near the lavender. All he could do was to chuckle without humor, coughing as he did, shaking his head at the lies he'd believed in his youth about God's love and mercy. At least there might be someone to bury him now, in the lavender near all that he had loved. The girl out her hand for the lute. He narrowed his eyes. She seemed half asleep, and he knew no young girls who played. Yet, when he handed it to her, she tuned it expertly. "I had no idea," Thomas said, but she ignored him, and he was silent. She played. She sang. It was a song Thomas dimly remembered from his wedding feast, when his wife's eyes looked so kindly upon him. He had thrown a handful of sweetened nuts into his mouth, and his new heavy ring had hit its tooth, making him swear, making her laugh. The whole table had laughed. From that day forward, 3 taps of her ring on anything meant, "Do you remember our wedding day?" And 3 taps on his part meant, "God, yes." He recalled it all quite sharply. The smell of the bergamot in her hair, the whiteness of her neck, her eyes pearl green, how sweet the marriage bed had been. How even after years of amorous tusslings with camp women and kitchen girls, he had stood nervously while the old women took the ribbons off his verge, looking at this beauty whose pale, lovely belly was his to put the children in, and whose mouth was his to kiss for as long as he lived, or as it turned out, until he left for war. The old man knew this song too. It was the one he had learned in Valence, his 17th year, in the music teacher's studio above a candle shop, whose those gorgeous sounds had married themselves to the smell of tallow, such that even 50 years later he could not smell candles in church without being transported. It was this song, more than other, that made him want to travel with his lute. It was this one he played to seduce the chestnut-haired girl whose pregnancy anchored him on his little patch of land forever. The priest also remembered this song. He had heard it just before he went to take orders, when the bishop's personal musician came to the Lord's castle and hushed the room with it, making it seem possible to Matthew that a greater world lay beyond the disappointment of his father and the vanity of his brother. A world where God's love was unfiltered by priest or text and could be had freely by looking up at the sky, or hearing a man's song. It was a promise of joy he would not feel again until the May before the great death came, a joy made even brighter by how swiftly it was seized back then, how much it cost him. It had never occurred to him that a female voice might animate those fondly remembered lyrics even more sweetly than the long ago minstrel in the bishop's train. But now it did. The next 2 days would be hard. Thomas would dig Pure Matthew's grave as their host burned with fever and lost his reason. He would pull Matthew from under the arms while his feet dragged and the girls cried, and he got a last noseful of the priest's woolly, winely, lonely smell. The following day, Thomas would dig another grave and lay the old man in it without ever learning his name, though he knew the name of his wife, because it was to her the old man addressed his last words. On the third day, he and the girl would make for Avagon pulling a little goat on a rope, trying to call the dogs to follow them, but the male would stay whimpering in his master's house, and the female would lie on his grave, wagging her tail at them, until their forward motion collapsed her behind a stand of goldenrod. That would be tomorrow. For this moment, all three men remembered the best hours of their lives. Then the song finished, and the priest spoke. "The river," he said, and Thomas thought he meant the Rhone, the one that had killed him. "River froze last winter, saw you on skates of horses' shin bones, and now so white your legs, not red at all." Thomas understood now. Moon's light on you. He wanted to turn his gaze away at this talk of love between men, but couldn't. He knew it was the last he would see of this flawed priest who had become so dear of him so quickly. This was harder than Comet's death, and for all his goodness, the Comet was not gentle. He was of this world, and the brutality of the world. This man, Matthew Hannicott, seemed to have been misplaced here. He hoped there was wine in his heaven. Could a sodomite attain to heaven? He remembered the priest holding the girl up out of the water, and the abomination stung the life from him. Hoc est corpus meum. If that was not good enough for redemption, nothing ever would be. "Robert," he said now, grabbing Thomas's hand. "Thomas," the knight said in the husky voice of one fighting tears, "I am Thomas." "No. Find Robert. Tell him." "Who's Robert?" "My brother. Tell him." "Tell him what?" The priest worked one eye open and looked again at Thomas, breathing with great difficulty. "What do you want me to tell him?" The priest smiled. "I don't know," he said. He breathed 3 more hard breaths, each one longer in coming, and then he stopped. Thomas had seen so many die that his hands moved with the reflex to close the priest's eyes, but they were already glued shut for good. "Play another song, would you?" the old man said. Delphine looked up at him, surprising he was looking at her. He repeated himself, and she looked down at the instrument, in her lap as though it had just appeared there. Her tears fell on his face. "Play us something sad and sweet." "Go on," the knight said. "I don't think his soul's so far above us yet." She gave them a look and a sad smile that puzzled the old man, but Thomas had seen enough from her to understand. She doesn't know how. It wasn't her that played. Later that night, while the old man and Thomas stole a few hours of sleep, Delphine went to Matthew's cold body. She put her fingers below his nose and felt nothing. She sensed herself on the verge of some great blasphemy, but felt so angered at the sweet priest's death that she didn't care if she made God angry now. It would serve him right. I can't think like that. She prayed, "Let me do this, please. Work through me." She pried open the priest's waxy mouth and breathed into it as if she were God himself breathing life into Adam's dead clay. Nothing. She tried to conjure the feeling of the sparrow fluttering in her chest, and she thought she did, but wasn't sure. She sensed that she could almost do this, that with just a little help. Is that a sin? Delphine breathed into his mouth again. His big, cool hand, into which she had slipped her fingers, squeezed hers gently. Her heart beat like a rabbit's in her chest. She almost laughed with joy, and then the hand relaxed. "No." She breathed into his mouth again. Nothing. "Please," she thought. "He's so good. I need him. Please, I love him." Now the fluttering, different than her racing heart. Now her answer. "Leave him with us, little moon. You're not strong enough for that. Not yet." She shook her head against this denial. She blew into the dead man's mouth a dozen more times, but his fingers never moved again. And when she began to have the feeling she was troubling him, she went into a corner and sobbed until she washed the whites out of her eyes. That's it for this chapter, everyone. Again, thank you so much for being a part of this wonderful channel. I hope not to disappoint. And as always, good morning, good evening, and good night. I'll see y'all in the next one.